were constantly offering peace and on terms favorable to Britain. They didn't want any colonies. They didn't want the British Navy. They just wanted to end this war. And the reason it continued was because Churchill, who was under the control of the Zionist banksters, insisted on continuing it. And there's the story, of course, of the London Blitz, and we've all heard the stories of the brave Londoners facing the German bombs. So who bombed who first? I'm going to give you some quotes from the British on this, okay? The first is from J.M. Spate, Principal Secretary to the RAF. Quote, Hitler only undertook the bombing of British civilian targets reluctantly 3 months after the RAF had commenced bombing German civilian targets. Hitler would have been willing at any time to stop the slaughter. Hitler was genuinely anxious to reach with Britain an agreement confining the action of aircraft to battle zones, unquote, J.M. Spate. The second quote I'll give you on this is from Dennis Richards in his book, The Royal Air Force, 1939 to 1945, published by Her Majesty's Stationery Office. Quote, the primary purpose of these raids was to goad the Germans into undertaking reprisal raids of a similar character on Britain. Such raids would arouse intense indignation in Britain against Germany and so create a war psychosis without which it would be impossible to carry on a modern war, unquote.
Very interesting. Sounds a little bit like what they're doing now with ISIS and the so-called war on terror.
Yeah, you create a war psychosis by making you think that you're the victim, and you don't realize that it's actually your guys who are carrying out these deeds. I should mention there were about 60,000 British casualties from the German bombing, but many more times that many died in a single night in the bombing of Dresden. I probably don't need to go over that stuff, but when they bombed Hamburg with incendiary bombs, the temperatures reached 1,800 degrees. The winds were 150 miles an hour, and even the asphalt melted. And they say that children running down the street actually seemed to burst into flaming torches. This is all in contravention of the Geneva Convention. So
it had no military purpose either. It was pure, sadistic torture of civilians.
Right. So if you want to talk about a Holocaust, that's a pretty good example of one. Churchill was under the control of the Zionist bankers. Bernard Baruch had bailed him out after the 1929 stock crash. And when Churchill took more stock losses in the 1937, he was bailed out by Henry Strakosch, who was a Zionist gold mining magnate. And then he came under the direct influence of what's called the Focus Group, whose leader was as a Zionist Robert Whaley Cohen, the managing director of Royal Dutch Oil. So he was bailed out. He was under their thumb and the thumb of Victor Rothschild and the rest of the Zionist bankers, and they insisted he carry on this war, which was unnecessary. He could have had peace at any time.